Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Which means, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. I bear witness that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah and Allah alone. Allah has no partners. And I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, may the peace and blessings of Allah forever be upon him, is his last divinely sent messenger and the seal of the prophethood. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you. I want to welcome, I should say we, Salam Media. We want to welcome our friends and guests in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I am pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Today's topic for discussion is one of my favorites. Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, the former H-Rap Brown. Our special guests for this conversation are Kairi Al-Amin and Masood Abdul Haqq. Masood Abdul Haqq is a business consultant who specializes in helping small firms and entrepreneurs perfect their niche and market it to the world. A graduate of the business law program at the University of Central Oklahoma, Masood is adept at strategic planning and crafting effective written documents. Drawing from his experience as a hotelier and founding member of several businesses in Atlanta, Georgia, and Oklahoma City, Masood is often sought out by firms seeking to improve their market presence or customer and public relations. Masood owns Haqq Enterprises, a full-scale business solutions hub, and co-owns a chain of primary care pediatric clinics with his wife. An accomplished speaker and published essayist, Masood is a leading voice in the ongoing fight to free Imam Jamil Al-Amin. He resides in Oklahoma City with his wife and 3 children. Kairi, Free My Father, Al-Amin, is a licensed attorney, a member of the Al-Amin Law Group, LLC. He's also a business developer and consultant. Last but certainly not least, Brother Kairi is the leading voice in the ongoing fight to free his father, Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, the former H-Rap Brown. And with that, I want to welcome both of these young brothers to today's edition of A Conversation with yours truly, El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you for having me.
Likewise.
Alhamdulillah, brother. Alhamdulillah. It's my pleasure. It is my pleasure. And in fact, it is beyond pleasure. It is a duty and honor. I want to begin this discussion with my brother Masood reading an essay of his that when I first read it, it just blew me away. In fact, when I read the essay, I remember going back and reading it twice, back to back, and I just smiled. It just caused me to have all kinds of smiles inside. And I said, if we ever, at that time, the book had not come out, the updated edition of the imprisonment of Imam Jamil. And I said to myself, if and when this book comes out, this essay, bi'idhnillah, it has to be a part of it. So without any further ado, Brother Masood, please share with us the essay that you wrote entitled Growing Up West End.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for the kind words. I was a witness. So, alhamdulillah, Allah allowed me to witness and recall things that Imam Jamil Al-Amin did that were impactful to myself and dozens and hundreds and hundreds of other young people like myself. So, inshallah, I'll begin. Bismillah. At the heart of the West End community was the community mosque, a quaint house turned spiritual refuge for Black Muslims all over the country. At the heart of the community mosque was Imam Jamil Al-Amin, a gangly, soft-spoken man from Louisiana with a scruffy reddish beard and a knack for catchphrases. My introduction to Imam Jamil was not direct. My family and I moved to Atlanta in the fall of 1992. The West End Muslim scene unfolded like some sort of Black Muslim utopia. A soulful Adhan was the soundtrack for Black children of all ages in kufis and himars, playing with each other on either side of the street. The intersecting streets near the masjid gave way to a large covered basketball court on which the game in progress had come to a halt due to the number of players who chose to answer the melodic call to prayer. Overlooking the scene from the bench in front of his convenience store, like a shepherd admiring his flock, was a denim overall and crocheted kufi-clad Imam Jamil. Before I heard him utter a single word, it was obvious to me I was in the presence of a transcendent leader. The early 1990s was an exciting time to be in Atlanta. However, one of the unfortunate undercurrents of our booming urban economy was the inevitable rise of the drug trade. Reagan had been out of office for a full term, but his crack epidemic and trickle-down economics were still very prevalent in the inner city neighborhoods across the country. The West End was no exception. At the intersection of Holderness Street and Lucille Avenue, just 100 yards from my childhood home and 4 city blocks from the West End Masjid, stood a notorious motorcycle club and corner store. Both businesses were knee-deep in the interest of prominent local drug dealers, and it wasn't long before that corner earned the reputation as a $1 million block. One might think living so close to such a dangerous corner would make for a tale of hard knocks, peer pressure, and intimidation. For the Muslim kids, that was the furthest thing from our reality. Instead, we ran around that neighborhood with impunity. When the dope boys saw us coming, they'd step out of our way, offer us to buy us snacks from the store, or just whisper to each other about us being big Slims folks. Sometimes they called him rap or the Imam. The bottom line was they may have pulled the usual dope boy tricks of recruiting and terrorizing kids within the neighborhood, but us Muslim kids were off limits. There was an honor associated with being a member of Imam Jamil's community, a VIP hood pass that made us immune to the usual ills of this sort of environment. This street credibility from outside the Muslim community stemmed from Imam Jamil's days as H-Rap Brown, a revolutionary fighting for Black rights. It evolved when he demonstrated the ability to bridge gaps between young and old, Muslim and non-Muslim. His entire life revolved around Salat at the Masjid. 5 times a day, the Adhan was called, and Imam Jamil would either lead or appoint someone to lead the prayer. Afterwards, no one would dare leave unless he raised his hand for permission and got the nod from the Imam. After finishing his dhikr and dua, the Imam would ask, "Is there anything anyone would like to bring out?" Brothers would bring forth questions, concerns, news from around the neighborhood, and the Imam would address it or tell the person to meet him after Salat. The drug issue was at the forefront. Slowly but surely, prayer by prayer, the $1 million block was abandoned. Miraculously, after efforts to clean up the neighborhood around the $1 million block, now stands the West End Islamic Center, a beacon of hope for sustaining the community. One day after Asr Salat, Imam Jamil asked, "Is there anything anyone would like to bring out?" My hand went up. All eyes were on me, this 12-year-old kid, and I blurted, "Why do you always recite 2 surahs in every rakat? When you were out of town, the other brothers did the same thing. Is that some kind of sunnah I don't know?" I saw eyebrows going up around the room and heads shaking, like this kid doesn't know what he's talking about. I felt like I made a huge mistake, but my curiosity had gotten the best of me. Imam Jamil smiled and replied, "I recite the surahs that have the most meaning, the most barakah." Later, he called me to the bench outside of his store to further explain his logic, dazzling me with his smooth way of words and sense of humor. For all the intrigue, awe, and fear that he inspires, the fact that Imam Jamil was willing to take time to address me when he certainly had more pressing issues on his plate is what I remember most fondly about him. For all of his international acclaim and notoriety, he will always be the man that paved the way for me to grow up proud to be Black and Muslim. The fact that I later got married and had 2 aqiqahs at the Islamic Center on Holderness and Lucille is just icing on the cake. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. That was very, very touching, brother. MashaAllah. Brother Kairi, share with our listeners and viewers how old you were when your father was taken from you, and what it was like, and what it was like growing into manhood without him.
Assalamu alaikum, first of all. Pleasure to see you again, and it's always a blessing to see my brother. What's going on, Masood? I was 12 years old when my father was initially arrested and taken from myself and my mother. And when I addressed that situation, I always tell people, like, the grow up process was immediate. It wasn't like I got to, from that point, continue to be a normal 12-year-old child and grow into adulthood. I kind of had to start understanding and making adult decisions really, really early, just because of the seriousness of what we were dealing with. I had to sit in those. I had to sit in those courtrooms every day. I had to catch the bus and train from school to the court to watch to see if my father was going to be returned back to me. I had to watch him get convicted of a crime that I even at 12 years old was confident he didn't do, and then I had to watch as those same 12 people decided whether or not the state would kill him or just take him from us for the rest of my life and his life as well. So it was a very difficult and just a very difficult situation. But it was an immediate growing up process. So, there are pictures of me at 12 years old crying with my hands over my face in the newspaper. And so that is, kind of a summation of the end of my childhood, so to speak. I became somebody who had to shoulder this load as well as try to navigate this thing without my father's presence with me. But alhamdulillah, we've been able to stay extremely close. When I could visit, we visited as often as possible. When he was in Georgia, we tried to go at least once or twice a month. When he moved to Colorado, which was terrible, we still tried to get out there once at least every 3 months. But now he's out in Arizona, and we're not allowed to visit currently because of the current state of the world. And then they also cut off our phone communication, so it's a little difficult. But throughout my growth, he had always been present either via phone calls or via some sort of visitation. And so he was still able to help shape and mold me into the adult that I grew up and grew to be. But as far as actually having a childhood, nope, that was pretty much erased at 12 years old. And so my adult life kind of started there, and I had to kind of move with a different kind of purpose going forward.
One of my vivid memories is seeing you with your head on the shoulder of your mother in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. It's hard to believe it's been 2 decades, but it has been 2 decades since this unfortunate trial first erupted. Brother Kairi, we are on an international platform, And there are folks in South Africa who are tuned into this live and also listening via radio broadcasts. There are folks in other parts of the world. One that stands out for me where Imam Jamil has some support is the UK. I'm sure that there are also members of, the UK community that are tuned in live, and there are others that will see the broadcast later. For those who have not been, who have not followed this case as closely as some of us have over the years, why don't you walk us through what Imam Jamil was accused of, and bring us up to where we are right now in the quest for a correction in this now 2-decade-old injustice.
No, absolutely. And once again, assalamu alaikum to everybody in South Africa, and especially in the UK. I actually spent some time living in the UK and studying Islamic finance, and I was pleasantly surprised when folks realized who I was and knew who I was and my connection to my father, the interest that was there all the way in the UK. And so that was even a shock to me that my father, that was around 2016, had that kind of reach at that time, still after being incarcerated for so long. So alhamdulillah, I'm appreciative for the support. But so my father is currently serving time for the murder of one police officer and the assault of another who survived. But let me take you kind of back to March of 2000. Two police officers were sent to serve a warrant for a traffic violation on my father and a failure to appear in court. When they arrived, the man that they met, who we now know as Otis Jackson, responded to their inquiries with gunfire. But Otis Jackson is a professed gang member and gang leader who had the mind that when police officers approach you, that's how you deal with them. And so he's confessed to this crime for over 20 years. But instead of Otis Jackson being pursued, the plan was to pursue and pin this crime on my father. And that is what happened. The FBI was present that day before the event took place, and they were the first responders on the scene, and decided to ignore any signs that pointed to anyone or could possibly point to anyone but my father. My father was in the area for Salat, as is customary for him to be, because this crime took place in a field adjacent to our masjid. And he fled to Alabama after the incident took place. And a question that I receive a lot, or used to receive a lot, alhamdulillah, we've been doing a pretty good job with dealing with this question, but was, why did he run? And he ran because of his history and understanding, for one, of his relationship with this government and how they treat him and how they view him. And, if we look at what has happened subsequently, it's much easier to understand why he ran. He's currently blind and sitting in a cell trying to figure out how he's going to read his medicine bottles today because of his relationship with our federal government. And so that was the reason why he ran. And it's funny because even in his running, when they found him, they tried to paint him as this crazed maniac who shot at them out of the woods when they found him. And then the locals there told, their side of the story. And their side of the story was they only saw gunfire going into the woods. They didn't see any return fire from that area, which means the plan was to kill my father. We also have an officer from the Whitehall area where my father was finally captured who attested to the fact that he told my father to stay down because he heard that their plan was to kill him if he moved. And so, alhamdulillah for that, man. But yeah, no, it's a heinous crime. And my father has always attested that he was innocent, and he's always sent his condolences and well wishes to the family, and wants them to understand that he wants the same justice that they want. But justice is not him serving 20 plus years for something that he obviously did not do. Aside from the confession, there were so many other discrepancies in the case. They violated his rights, his constitutional rights. If you're familiar with our Constitution, these are rights that are inalienable, as they say, or every American is supposed to be afforded these rights, and they were violated. And these violations have been addressed by our federal court system, but unfortunately, they couldn't overturn the ruling because of judicial proceeding rules that we have here. And so it's very convoluted. And the long and short of it is, if the government is your enemy, it's very hard to win that fight, especially without the support of the people. And so that's what brings us here today.
Indeed. It's also important to note that this tragedy unfolded on the west end of Atlanta the night before El-Hajj. And so, there are those who argue and have argued for years, both Muslims and non-Muslims, including, folks as prominent as the late Coretta Scott King. When I visited her in the first week of the trial, and one of the things that she said to me was that, the accusations that have been made against Imam Jamil fly in the face of the character of the person that she's known all these years. And she's known Imam Jamil going all the way back to his days as H. Brown. She and her late husband, the celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I remember, in fact, the reason why I ended up going to the King Center in the opening days of the trial was to make a request of Mrs. King, as this is prominent, one of the most prominent figures at the time in Atlanta, Georgia, to make a public statement, to just call for a fair trial, fair proceeding for Imam Jamil. And without any hesitation whatsoever, she conceded to doing just that. In fact, she instructed me, and Brother Talal was with me. I don't know if you remember him, Brother Talal. He was with me, and she instructed us to come back the next day, and she would have a statement prepared, and she did. We made copies of it. We distributed the statement to all of the media that was there, and to many of the leaders and activists that were present. Anyone that we thought it needed to go into the hands of. And I'll never forget, in the days that followed, she ended up being attacked. Mrs. Coretta Scott King ended up being attacked for, quote unquote, interfering in a case that some deemed to be none of her business. That's how virulent the atmosphere was around that trial. Let me go back to my brother Masood and ask you, my brother, do you remember where you were the night of March 16th, 2000, when that tragedy unfolded on the West End?
I do. I was 18 years old at that time, and as you stated, it was the night before Eid, so we were celebrating. We had a skate party in the east side of Atlanta, and at that time, everybody had, people still had pagers, and some people may have had some flip phones, and halfway we were in the middle of the party, and everybody's devices started going off, and they said something was going down in the West End. It was a bunch of gunshots. And we made our way to the West End because we didn't know what was happening or why we were being called, who may have been involved. We got there, the scene wasn't even completely roped off or anything like that. So I was on the scene probably within an hour, maybe an hour and a half afterward. And you could see, an amateur detective could see, could put together the story based on what was in front of us, right? There was, a puddle of, there were different puddles of blood, and then there was a trail of blood.
That's right.
That left the scene altogether. And we followed that trail. It was in the West End, the shooting happened near the corner of Oak Street and West End Place. And that trail went down West End Place, and you can almost follow it down a street called Eggleston Street. So it was someone was bleeding profusely leaving the scene. and it was never addressed. And we just kept waiting for that to come up. It was brought and struck down in trial. You know, it looked like he went into some abandoned house on Eggleston Street, which is a block and a half away from where it happened. And at the time, you remember the news as it was coming in real time, you could hear, you know, them talking about the 911 call. And they said there were several motorists that were passing by and stating that there was a man trying to flag down vehicles. They were saying, you know, there was a lot of that kind of chatter, and then that quieted down, you know, once they got their story together. So it was a jarring time, and you know, we still had to observe the rites of Eid and everything, but it was a very somber mood, and you know, it was just a wild, surreal time to be in a place where, you know, as the essay stated, you know, he was revered. He was, you know, he was the protector, the shepherd, so to speak. And for him to be ripped away and all that uncertainty to be hanging over, you know, what is supposed to be a festive and joyous occasion was something that I'll never forget.
I want to follow this up with a question that may be a bit sensitive, but it's a very important question. By the grace of Allah, and may Allah Ta'ala bless you for it, you have been able to understand the responsibility that you have as someone who grew up, as you put it, under the protection of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin and the community that he established. You had a strong affinity for Imam Jamil because of that leadership, because of the leadership that he provided the community as a whole. Why do you think, Brother Masood, many other young Muslims, especially, as well as non-Muslim brethren who also grew up West End, have not been willing to speak out as you have been willing to do? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think a part of it is, you know, it reminds me of the Langston Hughes poem when he asked, you know, what happens to a dream deferred, right? So we were in the middle of this dream. We were in the middle of building, you know, this Black Muslim utopia, as we put it, but it was halted. So the development of a lot of young brothers, you know, was halted. Alhamdulillah, you know, I was blessed, you know, to be able to survive that neighborhood and continue to thrive via different avenues. But so many people who still needed guidance, you know, they weren't afforded that guidance because you removed the head. The body didn't die, but it was weakened, and the brotherhood weakened, and the camaraderie, you know, it weakened. I mean, it just did. You know, alhamdulillah, they've been able to continue calling the adhan 5 times a day and keeping the doors open, but the vibrancy was not there. The sense of pride started to wane a bit. So a lot of brothers who would have, you know, maybe developed, you know, later in their teens or in their 20s, you know, it was more of an opportunity to just say, you know what, that was a good run. You know, that Muslim thing was cool. But I'm out, or I'm gonna hit these streets, you know, and a lot of people, they just succumb to the pressures and the desire to be in the street, and among those elements that Imam Jamil was working so hard to protect us from. So for every one of me and Kairi, you know, there's 25, you know, brothers who didn't quite pan out, and you know, they're living day to day without much purpose right now.
SubhanAllah. So well put, brother. You know, and speaking of Langston Hughes, I'm reminded of a poem of his called Justice. That justice is a blind goddess, is a thing to which we blacks are wise. Her bandage hides 2 festering sores, which once perhaps were eyes. And on this issue of justice, Brother Kairi, our brother Masood just touched upon a number of things related to this case against your father. You know, the fact that there was a blood trail, and also that the word that was going out between along the police channels on that night was that the perp was shot. He was wounded, and there was and there was a blood trail. There was a blood trail that led to an abandoned house, as Brother Masood pointed out. And initially, they were insistent that that was the blood of Imam Jamil, until a few days later, when he was taken into custody, they were shocked to learn that he did not have any gunshot wounds. They were shocked, and then that's when the narrative quickly changed. Okay, and
Right.
the blood that was initially determined to be his was ended up being undetermined. They couldn't determine whether it belonged to a human being or an animal. SubhanAllah.
Right.
And then there were so many other inconsistencies. The assailant not being the height of Imam Jamil, and there's just so many inconsistencies on top of inconsistencies. You have been engaged in a very personal way, and also in a forensic way, speaking in legal terms. And you have been able to dissect this case like no one else has been able to do. Share with the audience some of the other important tidbits surrounding this case that the average person who hasn't taken the time to study it would be shocked to know. What are some of the other tidbits, Zaki?
Sure. Well, like you spoke of, we had the blood situation, but aside from that, we had there's so many. We had a ballistics lady who worked for the state of Georgia, who did the ballistics on the weapon that supposedly was the weapon that was responsible for these shootings. She was later fired for running faulty ballistics and not completing the test that she was supposed to complete when running ballistics for these kinds of cases. And a few cases have been overturned since that she did the ballistics for. So we had situations like that. We have situations like we had an FBI agent who found the weapons that in Alabama, who has a history of placing weapons on suspects. The last suspect that he placed the weapon on, and the exact kind of weapon that he placed, he did it right after shooting him in the back of the head. The police down in Alabama actually said that these weapons, they didn't seem like someone dropped them when they were running through the woods. It seemed like someone came and put them there. And aside from that, the dogs had gone through the area the night before and weren't able to find a semi-automatic machine gun. and so, that was really strange. We have the misidentification by both officers that you touched on. They described this man as 5'9" with gray eyes. Their response to that was, "Hey, we were just saying what we were told to say based on the police report." Either way, it says you didn't know you don't know the man that you're looking for. And so, but my father, just for reference, 6'5" with dark brown eyes, and he usually has on dark sunglasses because he needs prescriptions to see. So he put prescriptions in his sunglasses. Let me think. What else did we have? We had the FBI telling us that we were not, or actually closing the courtroom to tell us that we could not question the agent about his past gun placing activities. We weren't allowed to ask that question at all while he was on the stand, to suggest that he may have had a history of doing this and thus he may have done it again. Everyone was kicked out of the courtroom so that the FBI could talk to the judge and tell them that no, we weren't allowed to have that conversation. And so it was just a lot of really weird circumstances, even on a smaller scale, from the judge baking the juror cookies and things like that, and sending the messages back and forth. And then, the judge pushing for the death penalty. And then before she dies, saying that she was always against the death penalty. And so people even changed their policies for purpose of getting rid of this man who they seem to be so afraid of. People got promotions as soon as this case was over. The lead prosecutor, Mr. McBurney, had a quote saying, we finally, after all these years, we finally got him, and so and he's now a judge, and so it's very, very strange. They put a gag order on Otis during that time as well. A gag order was on my father and on Otis, and they couldn't speak to the press during the trial. So my father couldn't defend himself in the court of public opinion. Any rule you could break was broken in the pursuit of this conviction, not in the pursuit of justice, because that's not what they were after, but in the pursuit of this conviction.
That's right. And on that, after all of these years, we finally got him note that the lead prosecutor McBurney stated after Imam Jamil was convicted. It is a reminder to me and many others that COINTELPRO lives. Imam Jamil was a target of COINTELPRO back in the 60s. I just made a note in the conversation we had a couple of days ago on courtesy of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, that I just recently learned, and I was shocked to learn this because I didn't know this until just a few days ago, that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came up on the radar screen of the late FBI director,
J. Edgar Hoover.
J. Edgar Hoover came up on his radar screen in 1955, right after the Montgomery bus boycott. In 1955, Dr. King became a target. He became a person of concern, and if not an avid target. And then later we know that in the coming years, he became one of Hoover's principal targets. Hoover had a very deep and profound hatred for him. But the point being, he came up on the radar screen in 55, and he remained on that screen. H. Rap Brown was on the radar screen of the FBI in the early 60s as a young man. And he remained on that radar screen all the way through his transition to Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, later Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, all the way up to that fateful day on March 16th, 2000. And so McBurney's words were actually an echo of what many others, no doubt, within that network felt. We finally got him. SubhanAllah. And unfortunately, I am not able to access the chat during the broadcast, unfortunately, because of my vision challenge.
I'm not. Well, I was just trying to let you know that I wasn't feeling well, so I'm going to have to step away for a second.
Okay, my brother, go ahead. Step away and then come back when you can, inshallah. All right, my brother. Let's continue this retrospective and on Imam Jamil, on the impact that he had on community life. First, on that note, Brother Masood, are you aware? Are you aware of the impact that Imam Jamil had in other parts of the country? Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am. One of the things that allowed us to see the magnitude of his impact and the extent was an annual event that was held in various different cities each year called the Riyada. And the Riyada was somewhat of a Muslim Olympics, so to speak, but with an educational component to it, where there'd be speakers and different lectures and classes and things being taught around an athletic kind of conference. So it allowed the communities that were under the guidance of Imam Jamil Al-Amin to get to know one another, first of all, learn from one another, and also, kind of compare ideas, things that are working in Cleveland or things that are working in Philadelphia, New York, Greensboro, North Carolina, Detroit, so many different communities that looked to Imam Jamil for guidance. And we would find, similar people to us in different communities, and it strengthened the bonds through the generations. So it allowed me to see that, he wasn't just, our Imam, he was a national Imam. And then we'd see him on national platforms and on stages with other Imams and leaders with big names, big followings, and they would all defer to him. So, to us, we didn't know H. Rap Brown. We only knew Imam Jamil. We didn't know H. Rap Brown. So we didn't know the how big of a deal that he was, because he was so accessible and down to earth to us. But once we'd start to go to all these other places and we saw these people with these bigger names and they're looking at him the same way we looked at him, then it was like, whoa, this man is on another level. He's a global figure. He's an icon. And then we started to read, and we were able to read his books and things like that. And it all came, full circle as to who he really was and why he was so beloved and profound. I also wanted to point out, you mentioned COINTELPRO and you mentioned the vendetta that J. Edgar Hoover had for him. And it's a perfect time to bring it up because there's a really well done movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, that's out right now, about the Black Panther chairman, Fred Hampton, who was assassinated, by COINTELPRO as a young man. And that was the obvious desire, and that was the stated, goal of COINTELPRO. That's what they wanted to happen to everybody who was a target of them. And the fact that they unsuccessfully, they attempted to do the same thing after his speech that H. Rap Brown did, where they ambushed him and shot him, and he went on the lam that time, right?
That's right, in Maryland, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, it was when Kairi spoke of his knowledge of how much they hated him. He had the lead inside of his body to prove it, right? And it wasn't that it was some spooky thing or some conspiracy theory. They literally tried to kill him the same way they did Fred Hampton. He happened to survive. He happened to go to prison and continue, his efforts in expanding the truth and bringing people toward the truth. The fact that he was able to do that in a metropolis, growing metropolis like Atlanta, in the middle of it, close to downtown, and he was thriving in that role, based on the vendettas and the nastiness of the COINTELPRO behavior, that had to eat at them. And over the years, the most petty crimes that we would see, like random, normal, everyday assault and battery type crimes, you'd see ATF, you'd see FBI, you'd see Red Dog Police, you'd see, all sorts of firings, people lined up to try to say, was it him? Was it him? Tell me it was him. Just tell me, say it's him and you're done. Give us the word. We witnessed this time and time again.
Yeah.
So by the time March 16th, 2000 happened, it was like, oh, not this again. It wasn't new. He had remained a target from the time that he was H. Rap Brown. And when they tried to attempt to assassinate him back then, and when he survived and made it through his prison sentence and came out an even better leader, you knew that grinded their gears.
And that's a very important point that you've made, brother. One of the things that we tried to capture in the book, the imprisonment of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, Is It a Government Conspiracy?, is to really show the many different elements of Imam Jamil and, pointing to the fact that it was and is a government conspiracy. His imprisonment is the result of a conspiracy to take him out, to eliminate him by any means necessary. And this is the reason why McBurney said what he said at the conclusion of that trial. We finally got him, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in an editorial that followed said, Jamil Al-Amin will die in prison, alone and forgotten. This is what they've wanted. And since he's been imprisoned, he's been unofficially under something that we refer to as, well, it's known officially as SAMS, Special Administrative Measures. Officially, he is not under SAMS, but unofficially he is. And this is the reason why journalists, writers, researchers, historians, sociologists, you know, those who have been wanting to have access to him, the way that so many have been able to have access to another political prisoner, you know, Mumia Abu Jamal. They've been able, you know, there have been those who have been able to have, despite the fact that for most of his years he was on death row, you know, they were able to have access to him nevertheless. Imam Jamil, no access at all. And so, you know, there was and is this this agenda to silence him by any means necessary. And, you know, him being where he is under the circumstance that he is an example of that. Glad to have you back, Brother Kairi. Why don't you, brother, given the fact that we just, we're nearing the end of the program, you know, an hour goes so fast when you're dealing with a topic like this.
Every time.
Share with the audience what they can do to help the campaign for Imam Jamil.
Well, inshallah, by the end of the day today, I was supposed to have it done already, but I've had a kind of back-to-back schedule. But by the end of the day today, we will have on freeimamjamil.com a little to-do list. We'll have a template letter that we have going out that we would like to have sent to the decision makers here in Georgia. And it has to go through Georgia because this is a Georgia situation. The federal government doesn't really intervene in state cases. And so we really have to deal with the decision makers in Georgia. And it's as simple as clicking on to freeimamjamil.com. You'll click a link and we'll have it there for you to copy and paste, and we'll have the email addresses for you to send it to. That's all we need, because our goal right now is to get Imam Jamil moved from Arizona back to Georgia, not only so that he can get the treatment he needs for his eyesight, his cancer, and other things, but also because he has an open and active investigation going on in Georgia that he should be a part of, and he's not allowed to do that all the way out in Arizona. And so those are the two main reasons we need to get him to Georgia. We're confident we can prove him innocent, but we need a kind of fair playing ground to do that. And that's what we're not being afforded currently.
And we should also note that there is another website, what happened to the number 2rap.com, that you put together. And there's a wealth of information on that website, including the video of the person who actually shot the two sheriff's deputies on the night of March 16th, 2000. Just a wealth of information. So we want to encourage folks to go there as well. What I want to do now at this point is invite both of you. We begin with Brother Masood to take a couple of minutes to make some closing observation. Give yourself 2 minutes, inshallah ta'ala, to make a closing statement on this ongoing struggle to free our brother Imam Jamil. Brother Masood, you first.
Inshallah. Bismillah. The one thing that I would like to leave with anyone listening is, you know, those words that, you know, El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan just quoted from the AJC, that Imam Jamil Al-Amin was going to die alone in a cell, forgotten, is what we're working so hard to make untrue, right? We understand that for so long, this country, America, has done everything that they could do to prevent the quote unquote rise of the Black Messiah. And that's anybody who can unite people who look like us. It's to anybody who can tell somebody that you are great. You know, if you have discipline, that you can achieve something. You can create a family. You can create community. The people who have done that and have done it unapologetically and have done so with eloquent words that don't necessarily make the powers that be look good, they've always been a target. So we, as the people who have benefited from those people, from those voices, from those leaders, we have a responsibility to make sure that those first words don't ever come true, that he's not forgotten, that we never stop raising awareness, that we never stop fighting for his freedom, because we know that if we do that, then they've won. And in order to continue to carry the legacy of Imam Jamil Al-Amin and H. Rap Brown, you know, the very least thing that we could do is speak out against injustice. So I salute the people who, you know, first you, Brother Saalakhan, for continuing to raise awareness. And of course, my brother Kairi, you know, for being an outstanding son. I don't think that you've left any stone unturned, and you're continuing to turn on with all of the other things that you're doing in your life. And the people who are listening, the people who tune in, the people who continue to donate when it's necessary and to contribute or show up when necessary. Tell another person to do what we're doing, and inshallah it'll be blessed, and we'll be able to see the good brother Imam Jamil Al-Amin before we go.
Alhamdulillah. Brother Kairi, your final words, my brother.
Alhamdulillah. You know, Masood's always a hard act to follow on final words. But alhamdulillah. No, you know, I reiterated this on our last talk, that my final words are always the same to anybody that I'm speaking with, but because we're speaking to a wider audience, I'd like to expand it a little bit. My final words are usually just to the people to remember that the Imam is innocent, because until we all come to that, you know, middle ground, it's really hard to get people to fight for his release for something, you know, if they don't believe he didn't do it, or if they believe he did do it. So my broadening of that to the international audience is to do a little research on your own. You know, you can come to whathappenedtorap.com. I've compiled everything there, but just do a little bit of reading and you'll come to the same conclusions we came to. The evidence doesn't point to Imam Jamil. The evidence really doesn't point to anybody. They don't have a whole lot of evidence, but we've provided them with what they always ask people to provide with when you're trying to free somebody. They say, solve the crime for us. Don't just tell us he didn't do it. And we've done that. You know, we know who did it. He's okay with saying he did it. And so, you know, it even, you know, he has gunshot wounds. Everything points to him doing it. So at this point, we have to raise awareness, but we first have to learn about it. Each one teach one, as they say. But aside from that, to everyone here in the States and overseas, we have to remember and just take stock of what we've seen cause change. You know, whenever there's an uproar that causes change, it's an international movement, and that's possible because of, you know, the internet and social media these days. But when things change, everyone's involved, everyone's speaking, everyone's hashtagging, everyone's making videos, everyone's making posts. We need that kind of support for Imam Jamil, because that's the kind of support he was out here generating for every cause that came across his table.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, my brothers, I want to thank both of you for joining us today on this Salam Media platform. I want to thank those of you who have tuned in live, and encourage you to share the link with as many people within your respective networks as you possibly can. Each one reach at least one, inshallah ta'ala. And with that, I want to give my brothers the closing salams, and then I have a closing remark that I want to make concerning this issue of Imam Jamil and the responsibility that rests upon our shoulders. So with that, Brother Kairi Al-Amin and Brother Masood Abdul Haqq, thank you again, brothers. May Allah Ta'ala bless you. May Allah increase your energy and preserve and make fruitful this ongoing struggle that we are waging collectively on behalf of our political prisoner, Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, the former H-Rap Brown. Assalamu alaikum, my brothers.
Wa alaikum
Wow.
salam.
A final thought. I want to ask my viewing audience and my listening audience to really consider not just getting one copy of the book, ordering one copy of the book, The Imprisonment of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, Is It a Government Conspiracy? But several copies. You know, books make wonderful gifts. The Imprisonment of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, the former H-Rap Brown, is a book of many voices. Sister Karima Al-Amin, the wife of Imam Jamil, Kairi Al-Amin, the son you just heard, Masood Abdul Haqq, the brother you just heard, Obaid Siddiqui, Hamza Raza, the broadcast journalist and executive Heather Gray of WRFG Radio in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Harry Edwards, the leader of the 1968 Olympic protests, in which H. Rap Brown played a key role, Imam Khalid Griggs, Dr. Cornel West, the late Coretta Scott King and former U.S. ambassador to the UN, and Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young. These are some of the voices that you can find in this book. You can also hear the voice of Imam Jamil himself. And let us not forget, we don't want to forget, you can even find the voice of the FBI, what they had to say about the objectives of COINTELPRO. That is in the book. The Imprisonment of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, Is It a Government Conspiracy? Tells the story of how one man with generational fire in his belly can affect generations of folk in very positive ways and be targeted for it. We quoted the celebrated poet Langston Hughes, his poem on justice. We are seeing the manifestation of this intrinsic awareness expressed today in the Black Lives Matter movement, which has gone global. Information is power, but information and awareness also obligates us. As that revolutionary psychiatrist from Martinique, Frantz Fanon, correctly opined in his celebrated work, Wretched of the Earth, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. It's time for us to stand up. It's time for the national Muslim organizations in America to stand up on the case of Imam Jamil, on the case of Dr. Afia Siddiqui, and on so many other political imprisonment cases involving Muslims and non-Muslims. Our deen obligates us. Islam obligates us. So again, get your copy of the book today. Get several copies. Give them as gifts. That's one way that you can not only empower yourself and others with information, with knowledge, but you can also help us in our campaign. And the very last thing I want to say is this. We need your material support, and we need it now. We, like other organizations, are affected by this pandemic. Your brother Saalakhan cannot go out on the road. I used to live on the road. I had a nomadic life. I lived more on the road than I was at home. I can't do that now because of this pandemic. But support is still needed. So we need you to give. Those of you who claim to understand the requisites of this kind of campaign, the requisites of this kind of issue, and the necessity of this moment that we are in, not just nationally, but globally. Well, we need more than just an understanding. We need more than just rhetoric in the various, on the various social media platforms. We need material support for these campaigns. In every possible way we can generate that material support, not the least of which is finance. The Afia Foundation is an organization with a stellar record of service, of struggle and service. We are the successor of the Peace and Justice Foundation, which had over 2 decades of stellar service on issues of human rights here in America. We are the successor, the Afia Foundation now, of the Peace to Justice Foundation. We need your support, and we need it now. So with that, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the rest of your day. Those of you in the same hemisphere as I, and for my brothers and sisters in South Africa, it is now evening. We are the last program in the network of Sunday programs. And I thank those of you who always join with us for this conversation that we have each week. I'm hoping you get as much out of it as I do. And I want to thank those on the Salam Media side who have made this production possible. My brother Sadiq, I want to thank him, and he's the frontline engineer for this program. And I want to thank all of the others that whose contribution to making this program possible makes it possible for us to engage in information, hopefully eye-opening and consciousness-raising information. With that said, Brother Ibrahim, I don't want to forget my brother Ibrahim and our sister Aliyah. They too are part of the team that helps to make this program what it is. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.